I never thought I'd be here, confessing this story to anyone, not even to myself in the quiet hours when truth has nowhere to hide. But some stories need to be told, if only to make sense of the threads that have woven themselves into the tapestry of my life. My name is Valerie Woods. I'm 45 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, a place of misted mountains and artisan souls that somehow became my sanctuary after years of restless wandering. The woman staring back at me in the mirror each morning is someone I'm still getting to know. Dark brown hair with defiant strands of silver, hazel eyes that have seen enough to be cautious but still hope, and a face lined with what I prefer to call experience rather than age. I write for a living. Lifestyle pieces, cultural spotlights, personal essays, words that pay the bills but rarely touch the depths of what I feel. My apartment is my haven. Walls lined with books, corners filled with half-finished canvases, windows that frame the Blue Ridge Mountains like living artwork. Some days I love the quiet. Other days it wraps around me like a shroud, reminding me of choices made and paths not taken. It's been nearly 7 years since my divorce from Mark. Our story began in New York, amid the chaos and beauty of two young artists falling desperately in love. He was kind, talented, steady, everything I thought I wanted. For a decade, we built a life together, brick by careful brick, until I woke up one morning and couldn't breathe anymore. The walls of our carefully constructed life felt like they were closing in, suffocating the parts of me that craved something unscripted, something wild. I need space, I told him, using those awful cliched words that wound so deeply. I need to find myself again. His face that day haunts me still, confusion melting into hurt, then hardening into resignation. We both knew what I meant. I wasn't just leaving our apartment, I was leaving our life. I moved to Asheville 6 months later, convinced that the mountains would heal what the city had broken. And in many ways, they did. I found rhythm in solitude, purpose in my words, a community among the eclectic souls who populate this artistic haven. But loneliness has a way of finding you, even in the most beautiful places. That autumn afternoon last year, I wasn't looking for anything except perhaps inspiration. The light was perfect, that golden October glow that makes everything it touches seem precious and fleeting. I'd spent hours wandering through the River Arts District, notebook in hand, gathering impressions for a piece on local artists, when I noticed a small gallery I'd somehow missed in my previous explorations. The exhibition was sparse but powerful, abstract landscapes that somehow captured the essence of the mountains without literally depicting them. I stood before one canvas, lost in the swirls of indigo and emerald, when music drifted through the open door from the cafe next door. A guitar, playing something hauntingly familiar that I couldn't quite place. Almost without deciding to, I followed the sound, stepping into the warm amber light of the coffee house. That's when I saw him. Chris Martin wasn't what anyone would call conventionally handsome. His blonde hair was perpetually tousled, as if he'd just rolled out of bed, and his clothes had that comfortably worn look of someone who dressed for himself rather than others. But when his fingers moved across the guitar strings and his voice, raw and tender, filled the room, something shifted in the atmosphere. He was transported, and so was everyone listening, including me. I took a seat at a small table near the back, ordered a glass of Cabernet, and let myself disappear into the music. He played covers mostly, Dylan, Springsteen, some newer indie artists I recognized from my playlists, but he inhabited each song as if he'd written it himself. When he looked up during a particularly soulful bridge, our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, everything else blurred into the background. I looked away first. I'm good at that, breaking connections before they form. After his set ended, I was gathering my things to leave when he appeared beside my table. You looked like you were a million miles away during that last song, he said, his voice different now, softer, curious. Up close, I noticed his eyes were the kind of blue that reminds you of summer skies, clear and unburdened. Maybe I was, I answered, surprised at my own honesty. Music has a way of doing that. I'm Chris, he said, extending his hand. Valerie, I replied, taking it briefly. Can I buy you another glass of wine, Valerie? Unless you need to be somewhere. I should have said yes. I did need to be somewhere, anywhere but here, starting a conversation with a musician who looked barely old enough to have experienced real heartbreak. But instead, I heard myself say, I'd like that. One glass turned into two, and the cafe emptied around us as we talked. Not the usual get-to-know-you small talk, but real conversation about art and music, and what it means to create something that might outlast you. He was 28, I learned, 17 years my junior. But there was an old soul quality to him that transcended the number. What brought you to Asheville? He asked, twirling the stem of his beer glass between his fingers. A divorce and a desire for mountains, I said, attempting lightness but hearing the weight in my voice. He nodded, not with pity but with recognition. Sometimes you have to leave to find yourself again. Is that what brought you here? A shadow crossed his face. Something like that. A relationship that burned too bright and left nothing but ashes. And music. There's something about these mountains that pulls the songs out of you. When we finally left the cafe, the night air was crisp with the promise of winter. Standing on the sidewalk, awkwardness crept in. That moment when possibilities hang in the balance. I'd like to see you again, he said simply. No games, no pretense. I hesitated. I'm probably too old for you, I said finally, voicing the obvious. He smiled, a crooked lift of one corner of his mouth. Probably. But age seems like the least interesting thing about you, Valerie Woods. We exchanged numbers, and I walked back to my car convinced I would never use his. These things don't work, I told myself. They become complicated, or painful, or embarrassing. And yet, 3 days later, when he texted asking if I'd like to see an exhibition at the Black Mountain College Museum, I said yes without hesitation. That first date, if that's what it was, unfolded with unexpected ease. We wandered through the galleries, arguing pleasantly about artistic intentions and the merits of formal training versus raw intuition. Afterward, we hiked a short trail to a lookout point over the city. I come here to write songs sometimes, he said, as we stood side by side, watching the lights of Asheville begin to twinkle in the dusk. Something about seeing everything from a distance helps put the pieces together. I know what you mean, I said. It's like that with writing, too. Sometimes you need perspective to find the story. When his hand found mine, fingers intertwining with natural ease, I didn't pull away. Something was happening that I hadn't planned for, hadn't protected against. Over the next weeks, we created a geography of our own. Favorite trails in Pisgah National Forest, hidden corners of bookshops downtown, the back booth at a Thai restaurant where the owner soon knew our orders by heart. Chris introduced me to musicians playing in basement venues I'd never have found on my own. I took him to gallery openings, where he charmed my usually reserved colleagues with his earnest questions and infectious laugh. All the while, I kept waiting for the dissonance to set in, for our different life stages to create unbridgeable gaps. But instead, something else was happening. In his company, I found myself remembering the woman I'd been before responsibilities and compromises had smoothed my edges. Passionate, spontaneous, alive to possibility. The first time he kissed me was after a concert at the Orange Peel. We'd spent the evening pressed together in the crowd, the music vibrating through us like a shared pulse. Walking back to my car through the light November rain, he stopped suddenly, turned to me and said, "I've been wanting to do this since the moment I saw you." His lips were soft, tasting faintly of the craft beer he'd been drinking. It was a tender kiss, questioning rather than assuming, and when we pulled apart, I felt dizzy with something more potent than desire. Recognition, perhaps. The sense of finding something I hadn't known I was looking for. "Come home with me," I whispered against his mouth, surprising myself. His apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a young musician. Instruments in various states of repair, books stacked alongside vinyl records, mismatched furniture collected from thrift stores and sidewalk giveaways. But it was clean, and the huge windows overlooked the French Broad River, moonlight dancing on the water. That night unfolded with the strange familiarity of remembered dreams. His hands on my body were reverent, tracing the map of my life. the cesarean scar from a pregnancy lost in my 30s, the slight softness around my middle that no amount of yoga had banished. Parts of me that I'd learned to apologize for, he celebrated. You're beautiful, he murmured against my collarbone. Every inch of you. For the first time in years, I believed it could be true. Afterward, lying in the tangle of his sheets, I traced the tattoo on his shoulder. A compass rose with no north. What does it mean? I asked. That I'm still finding my direction, he answered, eyes heavy with approaching sleep. Aren't we all? In the morning light, reality reasserted itself. Looking at Chris's sleeping form, the smooth skin, the body unmarked by decades of living, I felt a cold wave of doubt. What was I doing? This wasn't sustainable. People would talk. I'd become a cliché. The middle-aged woman clinging to youth through a lover young enough to be, well, not quite my son, but close enough to raise eyebrows. I slipped from the bed and dressed quietly, intending to leave before he woke. But as I searched for my second earring, his voice, husky with sleep, stopped me. Running away? I turned to find him watching me, propped on one elbow. No accusation in his eyes, just quiet understanding. I was trying to spare us both the morning after awkwardness, I said, attempting a lightness I didn't feel. Come back to bed, Valerie. Just for a few minutes. Please. Against my better judgment, I did. We lay facing each other, and he traced the outline of my face with his fingertip as if committing it to memory. I know what you're thinking, he said. I doubt that. You're thinking this was a mistake, that we're too different, that it can't work, that people will judge, that I couldn't possibly understand your life or what you need. I was silent, my throat tight. But here's what I think, he continued. I think life is too short for that kind of fear. I think connections like this, real ones, don't come along often. And I think you feel it too. It's not that simple, Chris. It never is. But that doesn't mean it's not worth exploring. That conversation marked the beginning of what I can only describe as an unexpected chapter in my life. We didn't make grand declarations or attempt to define what we were becoming to each other. Instead, we built something day by day, a relationship that existed outside conventional categories. 3 months in, I invited him to a dinner party at my colleague Janet's house. It was the first time I was introducing him to my friends as whatever we were. I spent hours getting ready, changing outfits like a teenager, anxiety churning in my stomach. They're going to think I'm having some kind of midlife crisis, I said as we parked outside the elegant Victorian in Montford. Chris took my hand. Or they might just see that you're happy. Give them a chance. The evening was both better and worse than I'd feared. Janet's husband, Peter, took to Chris immediately, the two of them disappearing into discussions about vintage guitar amplifiers. The women were politely curious, asking him about his music and nodding appreciatively at his thoughtful answers. But I caught the glances, the raised eyebrows, when they thought I wasn't looking. Later, in Janet's kitchen, as I helped load the dishwasher, she approached with 2 glasses of bourbon. He's lovely, Val, she said, handing me a tumbler. Truly. But, I prompted, hearing the unspoken word. She sighed. No buts, just be careful. Not because of him, he clearly adores you, but because the world isn't always kind to relationships that don't fit the expected pattern. On the drive home, Chris was quiet, staring out the passenger window at the passing streetlights. That wasn't so bad, was it? I asked, trying to sound confident. They care about you, he said finally. I respect that. But, he smiled at my echo of my earlier conversation. But I wish they could see what I see when I look at you. Not just someone who's had more birthdays than me, but someone who makes me feel more alive, more myself than I've ever been. It was moments like that, unexpected depths of perception, that continued to surprise me about Chris. He was young, yes, but he possessed an emotional intelligence that many men twice his age had never developed. Spring arrived, painting Asheville in dogwood blossoms and fresh possibility. Our relationship settled into comfortable rhythms. Weeknights at my place, where he'd play his guitar on my balcony while I cooked dinner. Weekends exploring waterfalls and hidden trails in the surrounding mountains. I found myself writing with renewed vigor, producing essays that my editors called some of your most insightful work. But beneath the surface contentment, questions still circled like restless birds. What were we building? What future could we possibly have? Sometimes I'd watch him sleeping and feel a preemptive grief, knowing that eventually he would want children, a family, things that were no longer possibilities for me. I never voiced these fears, but Chris, with his uncanny ability to read me, sensed them anyway. One evening in May, we were sitting on my small balcony, watching a thunderstorm roll across the mountains. The air was electric, heavy with the promise of rain. I got offered a tour, he said suddenly. 3 months, opening for the Burning Roots. East Coast, Midwest, some West Coast dates. My heart stuttered. That's incredible. When do you leave? July, if I take it. What do you mean, if? Of course you'll take it. This is what you've been working toward. He turned to face me, his expression serious in the gathering darkness. I don't want to leave you. Don't be ridiculous, I said too sharply. This is your career, your dream. I'm not going anywhere. Aren't you? He challenged gently. Since the moment we met, you've had one foot out the door, Val. Waiting for the excuse to run. The first fat raindrops began to fall, but neither of us moved. That's not fair, I whispered. Tell me what you're so afraid of, please. The question hung between us, demanding an honesty I wasn't sure I possessed. But if not now, when? Everything, I admitted finally, my voice barely audible over the growing storm. I'm afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you've wasted your youth on a woman who's already lived so much of her life. I'm afraid of becoming a burden, an obligation. I'm afraid of loving you more than you love me, because time is teaching you while it's diminishing me. He reached for my hand, his touch warm against my suddenly cold skin. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Valerie Woods? Not the years that separate us, but the woman who taught me what it means to love with your whole heart, even when it terrifies you. The woman who sees the world with such clarity and compassion that it makes me want to be better, see deeper. The rain was falling steadily now, soaking us both, but neither of us moved. Take the tour, I said firmly. We'll figure it out. Those 3 months of separation were a crucible, testing what we'd built. We talked every night, sometimes just for minutes between his shows, sometimes for hours as he described towns I'd never seen, and I told him about the changing colors of the mountains as summer yielded to fall. The distance clarified things in ways that proximity had obscured. When he returned in October, browner from California sun and buzzing with stories, I was waiting at the airport, heart pounding with a truth I could no longer deny. I loved this man. Not as a bridge to lost youth or a balm for loneliness, but for himself, his kindness, his talent, his way of seeing beauty in forgotten corners. That night, curled together in my bed, I finally asked the question that had haunted me from the beginning. Where are we going, Chris? Really? Because I look at us and I can't see a conventional future. I won't have your children. I'll get older while you're still in your prime. People will always question what you're doing with me. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might have fallen asleep. Then he shifted, propping himself up to look directly into my eyes. I don't want a conventional future, Val. I never have. What I want is to build a life with someone who understands me, challenges me, makes me laugh, and isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. Someone who sees possibility instead of limitation. He paused, brushing a strand of hair from my face. That's you. It's always been you, from the moment you walked into that cafe. But, no buts. Life is uncertain for everyone. We could have 50 years together or 5. There are no guarantees. All we can do is choose each other, day by day. Last week was my 46th birthday. Chris organized a surprise party at the Gray Eagle, gathering friends both old and new, writers, artists, musicians, a tapestry of the life we've woven together. As I looked around the room, I realized something profound. Loving Chris hasn't made me younger, but it has made me more alive, more present, more myself. Is it always easy? There are moments of doubt, sidelong glances from strangers, questions about our unusual relationship. There are days when cultural references fall flat, when I'm acutely aware of the years between us. But there is also joy, deep, sustaining joy, that I had forgotten was possible. Sometimes I think about Mark and wonder if he's found happiness in his new life in Portland. I hope so. I hope he understands now that when I left, I wasn't just running away. I was running towards something I couldn't yet see. As for me, I'm no longer looking backward or forward with anxiety. I'm simply here, in this improbable love story set against the ancient mountains of North Carolina, learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to let yourself be known, completely and without reservation, by another human being. Chris is playing at the cafe tonight. I'll sit in my usual corner, notebook open but forgotten, as I watch his fingers dance across the strings. And when he looks up during that one particular song, the one he wrote for me, our eyes will meet across the room, and I'll know with absolute certainty that this unexpected love, in all its complexity, is exactly where I'm meant to be.